but it is great to be here. And I also want to say thank you to Texas. There are a lot of good things taking place in the state of Georgia on criminal justice reform efforts. And very candidly, a lot of those cues were taken from the work done in Texas. So I wanted to thank you for helping us to get where we are and build upon your success. So I appreciate that. Keeping with the theme of technology and corrections, there's really three areas I wanted to just talk with you about briefly this morning. One is our utilization of voice recognition system. The second is utilization of virtual offices. And the third is taking virtual hearings and utilizing technology for that. I've got to tell you one thing, though. While we all want to save money in our business of public safety, if you save money, that's great. But first and foremost, the driver of any initiative has to be enhancement of public safety. Then, if there are cost savings associated, it becomes a win-win. While money is important, it cannot be the driver in and of itself. Certainly is a factor. Just briefly, talking about our voice recognition system, what it is just what it says. It's a call-in system that is 99% accurate on voice recognition of the voice register. Now, if Georgia would have tried to embark on that through its own means, we would have never gotten there. We recognize the opportunity of partnering with the private sector in this area. Now, I got to tell you, from a criminal justice practitioner stance and well over 25 years in the business, we really are not all that good at letting other people come into our domain. I mean, I'm just being very candid with you. And how this came about, actually, a senator from the state of Georgia said, "Hey, Michael, I think you need to go over and listen to what these guys have to say." And we did, and it was a Georgia-based company, and we really liked what we heard. At the same time, in our clemency side of parole, we were moving towards a completely electronic system, no longer working off of paper files. But we knew that was going to increase our efficiencies, our effectiveness in a release decision-making, so we had to build some capacity with our officers because they, in fact, were going to have more caseloads coming out, more cases coming out to them. That was a concern. You all know as well as I do, the position truck isn't right around the corner. Nobody's just going to come and dump you new positions to handle these new cases. So instead of doing more with less, what we said is we got to find a way to do better with what we have. So we looked at a company called Anytrax out of Georgia, and we said, look, we know what research says. You can, in fact, over-supervise low-level offenders. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. So what we needed to do is we needed to target our high-risk offenders. How do we do that? By freeing up our resources of dealing with these low-end offenders. So we formed, if you will, a public-private partnership with Anytrax, and it's been a wonderful relationship. Now, here's the beauty of it. The offender pays for this. Georgia does not pay, and I'll just share some numbers just right off the bat. If we would not have Anytrax in that relationship, we would need 37 additional parole officers on an average caseload of 100. So, as I said, we weren't going to get those positions. We knew that, so we had to find a way to do it better with what we had. The other thing is, right now, Anytrax represents 15% of all parolee supervision. Now, okay, that's great. We're saving money, but is it being effective? It in fact is. Over 10,000 parolees have passed through on Anytrax, and as a result, they have had thus far a 97% success rate. So you can attribute that to Anytrax, but I think you can also attribute it to criminogenic needs being addressed, responsivity, those low-risk offenders not being overly supervised. And when you go around, I was joking outside a moment ago, if you want to find out if officers like something or not, you go out there and you ask them, because if they don't, they will be quick to tell you. And routinely we hear a good, positive working relationship with Anytrax. So, number one, the public-private partnership does work, and there are folks that can help supplement the criminal justice arena if you're just willing to reach out and do that. We have Linda Hughes, who's the CEO of AnyTracks here, Louis Hunter with AnyTracks. So I would encourage you afterwards if you want to talk to them specifically about it. I'm just a criminal justice guy. I don't get into the technology part. All I know is it works. And it works extremely well for us. We're in fact venturing out now into cell tracks. You know, electronic monitoring and GPS has been around for years. Some would argue that it is outdated technology. As a result, we are continuing to expand with AnyTracks and going to a cell tracks program. When over 2/3 of the population have a cell phone, it's become the way of doing business today, and that's not just with law-abiding citizens. Offenders, that's their way of communication. So instead of electronic monitoring and GPS, we now have a cell tracks program that we are embarking on. Although we're early into that phase, we're looking forward to some good outcomes. And oh, by the way, it's an incentive for offenders because they know that once they go from parole supervision directly with that officer to voice recognition, when they've been on voice recognition a year, they've had no violations, the parole board is more inclined to commute that sentence because they have demonstrated that they can comply with conditions directly under the supervision of the officer, but also through this voice recognition system. So again, very, very successful. Second thing is virtual offices. People thought I lost my mind about 3 years ago when we made the decision we're closing our offices. I can tell you the sky was falling when you said that. But here was the irony. We'd go around throughout the state visiting with parole offices, and you'd look around and nobody was in them. And so you'd ask, where's everybody at? Well, you know what? They were where they should be. They were out in the field doing parole work, visiting offenders in their home, work, community, treatment, exactly where they needed to be. So you got looking, why are we paying for all this square footage in this place and utilities? Made no sense at all. So in fact, in a year's time, we had set a 3-year plan to close all of our offices. Unfortunately, the governor gave us the directive to cut $1.5 million out of our budget. Easy. We're going to take that 3-year plan and we're going to condense it to 1 year. And I got to tell you, hats off to the staff because they made it happen. Very effective. So again, saving money. Now, I said saving money should never be the driver, and in this case it wasn't. What we found by closing our offices, we increased contacts with offenders by 22%. The other thing is, we found that officers reported spending more time with their offenders and having greater quality interaction with the offenders. Okay? So that made a difference. Our relationships with law enforcement and treatment providers increased substantially because we were out in the field where they were, working alongside them. And the other thing, you know, from the private sector, the worst thing you can do for a salesman is give them an office, right? Because what do we do at our office? We chit-chat, we catch up on the week, we find out what's going on, and quite candidly, we waste a lot of time in the office talking about nothing, when we ought to be using that time out in the community, supervising these parolees and these offenders, working with these treatment providers, networking with law enforcement, working with employers. That's where we should be. So we took the office, closed it down, we put 2 officers in 1 vehicle, but the biggest thing, talking about technology, we advanced on that. All of them had already had laptops, so we were there, but we issued a Droid device. And now we were on Lotus Notes, now we're in a Google Gov platform, now Amazon Cloud. It's made all the difference in the world. If you talk to schools now, bring your own technology, in essence, that's the way it is with parole officers in Georgia. They can bring their own technology. Whatever device you are comfortable with using, you can manage your day-to-day work there. And, oh, by the way, we set up a Google number for our secretary who now works from her home and has an office there. So instead of the offender getting released and reporting to the office, they have a number they call, and an appointment is scheduled, and they know this parole officer will be at your home on this date, this time for your orientation, and guess what? everyone involved in the parolee's life hears the expectations of parole. It's no longer one-on-one with the officer and parolee at the office, who, oh, by the way, he probably had to take a day off work to go and report. So none of that. Here's some things we didn't expect to find that we thought was really impressive. Utilization of sick leave has gone down. Why? I mean, you'd think, what's that got to do with it? Well, when you have an officer that has, and this is a real-life example from Hartwell, Georgia, an 8-year-old child that's sick, that they would have had to take sick leave to stay at home with that child, but that officer was able to use that day as their administrative day to catch up on all of their interactions, make contact with referrals and treatment providers, and follow up on work. Otherwise, they would have had to take sick leave and stay home with that child. And they said here they were able to do their work while their child laid on the sofa. So the sick leave has gone down. We've also noticed when you talk about generation today, the biggest thing that they want is work-life balance. You know as well as I do, I know I did watching my parents. We grew up and we lived to work. Generations now, they work to live. And they want that work-life balance. And they no longer have to say, I can't go to your soccer game because I've got to be here. I can't go see your play because I've got to be here. So they're allowed the flexibility to work, the schedule they need to work to get their job done. And also, offender supervision is not Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. The days of fortress probation and fortress parole supervision are long over with. So that's where we are right now when you talk about virtual offices. Finally, video hearings. If in fact a parolee does violate their parole and you take them to a final hearing before the parole board, what was happening, we got 5 different geographic locations at the time, and we're holding these in prisons. Okay? So the parole board member would have to travel to that prison, have the hearing. The parole officers, too, would have to transport that parolee to the prison. So a classic example, if you were holding a revocation hearing at Lee State Prison and they were coming over from Valdosta, 2 officers, that was their day, transporting that offender. By the way, every time you go into a secure facility, you're jeopardizing the safety and security, because anytime someone from the outside goes into the facility, it takes more time and resources for them to make sure the proper security protocols in place. We started thinking about that, going back to the utilization of technology. We said we've got to have a better way. Give you an example. Just last week, we had the parole board member in Atlanta, their office. We had the offender at Jackson State Prison, about 60 miles south, and we had the officer as well as a law enforcement officer up northeast in Rome, Georgia, which is about 90 miles, northwest. And we handled that final hearing, and it was as if they were right there through the utilization of video conferencing. So we've saved officers time. Officers now report that towards a final hearing they spend about an hour. Typically it was 4 to 8 hours. They leave, they're able to get right back to their job. Inmates now come to one central prison. They're put on Department of Corrections transport system. Oh, by the way, if you get revoked for parole, you were going to go to Jackson anyway. So why don't we start there and pull them all there? It makes good sense, doesn't it? I'm convinced sometimes logic does work. And in this case it did. So that is one thing. The safety and security to these GDC facilities was no longer an issue. It freed them up to do their core mission responsibility. And the other thing that is great about it, officer safety. Anytime, the more travel you do, the more custodial situation you have with an offender, your risk of safety goes down and your risk of something bad goes up. So that is one thing we found to be very interesting. In just the first 6 months that we implemented virtual final hearings, we saved 31,000 miles. If we would have continued to have hearings at those 5 locations, we would have had 31,000 miles. Think about the mileage, think about the time cost, and think about the safety when they're on the road with an inmate or an offender. So again, very, very positive things taking place. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Again, thank you, Mark, and your organization, wonderful. And thank you for Texas kind of leading the charge. And fortunately, Georgia had good sense to follow Texas and head down the right path. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you.